All right, welcome back. I am Anthony Mueller, the wine advocate reviewer for Washington State and South Africa. With me today, I will have a very talented winemaker, Todd Alexander from Force Majeure, making some fantastic Cabernet blends and Rhone varietals from Red Mountain and the Walla Walla Valley. Really, really tasty stuff. We'll see if we can get him in here. He also has a Pinot project in Willamette Valley, making some really, really tasty stuff. We'll see if we can find Force Majeure. We see them here. Come on, buddy. There we go. So, hope everyone's having a fantastic Wednesday.
Yes.
There he is.
Sorry about that.
No worries, man. It happens. This is 2020. What would 2020 be without a little bit of glitch in the matrix, right?
Yeah, totally. What would we? Where would we be without some technical glitches?
Oh, for sure. Right?
Can you hear me? Okay. Is it too echoey or is it?
No, perfect. We're good, man.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you so much, Todd Alexander, for joining me today. I know you're a really busy day and busy guy, and all the things going on within Washington and Oregon as well with your Pinot project. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to connect with me.
No, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So for anyone who doesn't know you, perhaps overseas, can you please introduce yourself and give us a quick background and bio about yourself and your winery and bio and brands in Walla Walla?
Yeah, sure. My name's Todd Alexander. I started making wine actually in Texas a long time ago and moved to Napa Valley. I worked for Plump Jack and Cade wineries for a few years, and then I moved to over to Bryant Family Vineyard. Was there for about 4.5 years, and when I left, I was the winemaker. And in 2014, I moved to Washington to partner up with Paul McBride at Force Majeure. Paul McBride owns some property in Red Mountain, and we decided to create an estate-focused program that didn't exist at the time for Force Majeure. And we started that off in Woodinville and then eventually moved over to Walla Walla, where we are now. And as of last year, so still pretty new to the Walla Walla Valley, but yeah, mainly we're focused on estate wines. I do have my own little side project because it's pretty small right now. It's called Holocene. It's focused on Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, and I work with. I had only been working with a couple of vineyards for the last few years. But this year I was going to add 3 more and going to have 5 vineyards I'm working with, but then the fires happened and it was kind of a bummer of a vintage, but that's kind of how 2020 is going in a lot of ways. So
For sure.
And then I'm consulting for the Walls Vineyards as well and doing some other projects with Weather Eye Estate on Red Mountain. A couple of, and one called Pasha. Weather Eye and Pasha have not been released yet, so but my primary focus has been Force Majeure for the past since 2014.
Awesome. By chance, do you have another device on right now? Because it sounds like there's a slight echo. It sounds like you're in a ballpark. Like
no, but it's probably just. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah. I mean, there's still a slight echo, but it's fine.
It's the room. It's a little bit boomy in here, so. Unfortunately, I could try changing rooms, but it's a little bit loud. It's one of the barrel rooms.
Oh, no, that's where you should be. Good, man. Surrounded by your wine. Awesome. Cool. So thank you for that. First off, Todd, how are you in 2020? 2020 has been unkind to many. How are your businesses?
We've been really fortunate. We've been, I feel like, somewhat insulated from everything that's going on in a lot of ways, other than our distribution partners have been really affected, and a lot of restaurants have been really affected negatively, as we all know, by the pandemic situation. As for the winery itself, I mean, our sales have been really strong. We've had really strong direct sales, and we have a mailing list, a really strong mailing list. So we do a lot of direct to consumer. We haven't had a lot of visits this year. We do have a limited hospitality program where we host people by appointment. We didn't have anyone for months, but we've slowly kind of reopened to that, and we're still ramping that up. Our winery is kind of built in a couple of phases. We have the production space that's completed now. It's ready to go. We're using it to make wine in, but we have another building. It's actually an old school. It was built in 1940, and we're going to be renovating that for kind of our hospitality and hosting people. But for now, we've been having people in the cellar when they come. But you know, we've been careful. We've been social distancing and wearing masks and not going anywhere. I had a lot of travel that was canceled this year. Hospice de Rhone was postponed to 2022. You know, and then all of my kind of market visits that I'd normally do have been pushed out. So I haven't really gone anywhere since, I feel like, February, other than Willamette Valley to check on vineyards. And it's been weird. I think we're all kind of in the same boat there. But all things considered, everything as far as what we're doing at the winery continues to go on normally. And we're full speed ahead. Nothing's really changed on that front. How about you? How have you been?
Kind of the same. All travel has kind of been shot, and I've been just kind of hunkering down in my home. Once a week I get out to the office. We've since basically had it closed down since California closed down all non-essential businesses. So I come every Wednesday to do these chats. So I'm talking to you from our conference office, our tasting room at the American Wine Advocate headquarters in Napa Valley, California. That's pretty much the gist of my travels. It's going from home to the office once a week, and then out to get groceries and supplies, and then just staying home and tasting and, you know, keeping my head down. That's how
normally you would have
2020.
You would have been up here in the spring and didn't get to see you. So
it was a bummer. I was arranging my trip with the Washington Wine Commission, and as everything was happening, I saw like how bad things were in China. I'm like, this when the Chinese government puts 12 million people on house arrest, that means they can't control it. It's only a matter of time. And unfortunately, you know, Seattle was the first to get hit in the States, and I would have literally been in Seattle for that first week tasting through all those wines when everything was being shut down. So it was just, you know, talking to the commission and Avril, she's like, wow, you couldn't have been more right about this. I was like, I'm sorry that I was. But, you know, it's here. We have to live with it. And and just you know, sending good thoughts out into the universe, cosmos, that good vibes come back to us and we get past this as unscathed as possible.
Amen to that. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Who knows?
That's why there's wine. So
that's right. We need it. I think that's why like wine sales have been so strong, is that people just need a drink, you know, to get through this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like Napoleon says, you know, you always carry champagne to war, to the battlefield, because in victory you've earned it, in defeat
you need it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So just remember, the doctor recommends only liquids, right?
That's right. That's right. Cheers.
Cool. Cheers to that. So we've got some wine to taste, but I've got a few more questions that kind of line up these bottles. You know, having worked in California, you worked for Bryant family, you worked for Plum Jack, you worked for Cade. You know, the Napa Valley is considerably different than the Walla Walla Valley and Red Mountains and Yakima. Was there anything that you took away from your experience working in Napa that you still regularly use in your day-to-day operations? In Washington? And
for sure.
For Pinot?
For sure. And I think there's a lot of things. Some of them are more overt and some are more subtle. Mm-hmm. A lot of it has to do with general outlook and philosophy. First of all, I was given great opportunities. I worked with some great people that I really respect, and people that I'm proud to call friends now, colleagues, people like Tony Biaggi and Helen Keplinger, Michelle Roland, David Abreu. Getting to work with people like that, really high caliber people, and learn from them was, that was easily the most important thing. And I really wanted to challenge myself and try to, I wanted to seek out the best people, and really challenge myself to rise to the occasion and see what I could do. So first of all, working with those kinds of people, you will learn a really strong work ethic. I feel like I've always had that, but it gets reinforced when you work with really great people who are talented and passionate and work hard and hold themselves to really high standards. So I think that, that rubs off on you. And some people don't have that. Some people do. Some of that you can teach and some you can't. A more practical sense, I think attention to detail is something that I really learned a lot, especially at Bryant Family, and the emphasis on farming and a way to do an estate winemaking program and how that's grown and vinified and what the philosophy is behind it and how the wines are made from a technical standpoint, but also from a philosophical standpoint. The transmission of site, the importance of site, the importance of farming, and striving always to make the best wines every year, but being sensitive to the dynamics of each vintage and allowing that to kind of show through, figuring out how to best craft the best vintage possible every year. The importance of blending. Blending is super critical. We're not making single block wines most of the time. We're making single vineyard wines, and I'm passionate about estate winemaking. I know some people like to take things and blend them, wines from different vineyards and blend them together. The vineyards could be hours apart, and you can make a great wine like that, and there's no doubt. But for me, I think it's more of a challenge, and it's a little more exciting when you can take a single place and you can vinify that and you can make a wine that's really outstanding and really complete, and it's challenging. I think also things like on the winemaking side, picking decisions, whether you're picking early, picking late, picking at the perfect time. And my philosophies and my practices have evolved over time. I definitely don't do everything the same way I used to do it when I was at Bryant Family, for example. And part of that comes with I'm responsible for a lot of wine that represents a lot of money, but at Bryant Family, when it's $500 a bottle, you don't take chances. You don't. You're a little less likely to experiment or do something. You're not there to really mess around. You're there to make the wine like the best it can be made.
Sure.
But I do. My philosophy is still like low impact. I do native yeast. I don't add. I'm a big minimalist. I don't like to add anything. I think it's important to get it right in the vineyard, get it right in the cellar, and let it be what it is. Show the place, show the vintage. Those are really important things. So I think all of those are elements of things that I've taken from my experience in Napa, but I've refined them over time, continue to refine them. I feel like I rethink certain things every year. There's never anything that's super static, and every vintage is a little different. So I don't do anything by recipe or anything like that. I have working with the same piece of property every year, you learn things, you make small tweaks in the farming, you make small tweaks in the winemaking until you get things kind of where you want them. And then you can kind of,
maintain, fine tune.
Yeah, you maintain. You're creating something that didn't exist before. So at first, like when I came up to Force Majeure and there's no state winemaking program, it was like throwing things up to see what sticks, and some things stuck and some things didn't stick. And that refinement process continues. And I think I've always said, I think it takes, 5 years or so, 5 vintages before you really know a property really well enough to consider like what's normal. Like the first 2 years I was in Washington, 2014 and 2015, and they were the hottest years ever on record, and I was
15
like,
for sure.
Yeah, I was like, is this normal? Like, this is so hot. Yeah. And everybody said, no, this is really atypical. And then we finally got back to more normal temperatures in 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Although we had an early freeze in 19, we weren't getting stuff like, super hot like 15 was. So, but the first 2 years I thought, man, what's going on? But I think we're seeing that, the fires in Napa and all the things that are happening in the environment, things are just changing.
For sure.
So that plays into one of the reasons I came up here too. I was thinking about this back in when I was looking at making the move. I looked at NASA's climate change model out to like 2050, and it showed places like Napa and Sonoma just getting super hot, and everything kind of moving toward the coast and moving north in terms of like ideal growing regions. So that was honestly something I considered as well in terms of coming up here. I probably went off on a tangent, but
no, that's great. No, I see the effects of climate change on areas, on crops, and it's a real thing. And I think that's going to be really one of the greatest challenges that wine makers and wine producers and wine growers really have to look at, and they have to adjust to meet the challenges of climate change, because that stands to be the biggest threat to quality overall. And understanding Mother Nature and how she is changing, and what is happening in the vineyard to the grapes to the resulting wine, it's integral. So
and I think so. Like this year in 2017 down in Napa, it was like smoke taint really bad. And I had to deal with that this year. I thought we were kind of okay up here, and then suddenly those fires near the Willamette Valley broke out, and 3 of the 5 vineyards that I was going to be working with all got smoke taint. So I didn't get fruit from them. The fruit that I did take in, we'll see. I didn't send anything out for testing. So far everything seems okay, but I don't know yet. And then we had in Walla Walla for maybe 10 days smoke, from fires, not near us, but the Willamette fires, or the fires that were out in Oregon. And so far everything's okay. Don't see any evidence of smoke taint, but it's scary, and it's it's something that's starting to happen. It seems like every year now, and you have to think about how you adjust your farming to temperature, but also how do you mitigate smoke. You have to look at Australia and look at research that's been done down there to really start to know how to fight these things. But I think it seems like things are happening fast.
Very fast.
Much faster than they even thought they would.
But it's a relatively cool day. I think it's a high of 78 here in Napa.
Oh yeah.
It was low in the high 40s this morning. But there's the intensity of the sun. It's the same kind of intensity that I felt living in Phoenix. It's like you could just be out, you could feel it radiating off your skin, but the ground temperature is pleasant. It's like 74, 75. But you can feel the intensity radiating off your skin. It's very strange.
And
I haven't experienced that feeling before, really this year. And
it's like almost November,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's weird.
It's almost November.
We're doing okay up here. We had kind of an early freeze. It got really cold a few nights ago. I mean, we got down in below 20.
Yeah.
And right now it's probably close to 60 degrees outside. We're upper 50s all week. So, but we had like kind of an early cold snap. Last year, kind of early October, we had a really early freeze too. I think it was like 3 days in a row where we had below freezing temperatures. But
for sure,
it's more common for it to get kind of like that here. It can get cold in October, but like, I've actually been paying attention to like what's going on down in Napa just the last couple of days, because I think there's some red flag days down there, and
we've had a lot.
Still not out of the weeds.
That's
scary.
Crazy. It's when I was watching everything happening in Washington, and all the producers scrambling, like it's supposed to like get free, like so everyone's scrambling, and it seemed like 2020 for Washington just came to like a halt. It was like, here it is, and then boom. It was like 1 or 2 nights. It's like, okay, it's freezing. You need to pull your grapes right now.
Yeah, we were fortunate. We already had everything in, so there was no worry for us. But some people who want to like leave stuff out, or you crop a little heavier,
Yeah.
you maybe didn't get as ripe as you wanted to. You know, didn't get the hang time you're hoping to get bring it in. Once you get those freezing temps, then the canopies just collapse within 5 days or so. Everything turns brown, gets crispy.
Yeah.
So there's time to call it.
Down call it for sure.
Yeah.
So let's break into some wines, right?
Okay.
We're going to try two Syrahs. So you just sent these to me last week,
Yeah.
10 days ago. And we've got two of your Syrahs, both are 2018. One is the estate grown Red Mountain Syrah, and the other is the 2018 SJR Vineyard Walla Walla Valley Syrah.
That's right. So,
and just looking at that like dark color, you can clearly see that that has that kind of dark, grit, that Red Mountain like intensity.
And this site, so this is the estate Syrah from Force Majeure's Red Mountain Vineyard. It's a southwest facing hillside, kind of along the ridge of Red Mountain. Most of the Syrah is planted in the upper part of the hill. It's Goblet trained. Everything's on individual stakes. It's like meter by 4, 3.5 by 4, something like that, spacing. And then it's quite rocky. So the first thing to know is it's all volcanic soil, fractured basalt, concreted ash, and then sandy kind of silt loam that's still got a volcanic base, but then has a high calcium carbonate content. pH of the soil is around 8.2, and it gets a lot of sun. And Red Mountain's a warm site anyway, as a growing region overall. But this site, like the hill's steep like this, so the fruit gets, or their vines get a lot of sun. The vines are close enough together that the fruit gets pretty well shaded. But it's windy. Red Mountain has a lot of wind, so you do get, what you're going to get is more tannin, thicker skins, not quite as juicy as say like the Rocks District, fruit from the Walla Walla Valley. But the challenge is kind of not making a wine that's singularly like muscular. You're always going to have muscle, and you're going to have some power and concentration in Red Mountain.
For sure.
The challenge is bringing the finesse and the elegance to it, right? So what I found over the years working with it is I'm pretty much to a point now where I don't use very much new oak, maybe 20%, and I've moved toward larger format oak, punch-ins, 300, 400, 500, 600 liter barrels, and not really any barriques anymore. And typically we're like 16 to 18 months in barrel. In the cellar, it could be during fermentation anywhere from 10, 14 days to like over 30 days on the skins. Some lots I do 100% whole cluster. Some I destem completely. Some get co-fermented with Viognier, some don't. So then we eventually at the end, during assemblage, we put the estate Syrah blend together. In this particular vintage, it ended up about 2% Viognier, 15% whole cluster, and mostly it's a combination of fermentation in concrete vats as well as stainless steel, and all native yeast, 5 or 6 day cold soak, usually, whatever it is to kick off native fermentation. And then that's pretty much the story on this wine. And it's evolved over the years. We make about anywhere usually between 350 to 500 cases of this wine.
Awesome.
That's what we end up with. And it's mostly up on that hillside in the rocky soil, but we do have some blocks of Syrah down in the deep soils at the bottom of the hill that do make it in. Those have a little bit more of like a little juicier character.
Smelling it, you get that sense of that little lift from whole cluster brings, but tasting it, it's still rich. It's still kind of has this mineral tension, has the rigidity, the minerality of Red Mountain, where you can tell it's a warm site. You can tell it can be generous, but there's like this grip to it that I think you've managed the tannins nicely. For me, tasting Red Mountain, there's always that kind of minerality that goes through the mid palate and kind of grips the gum line, but it has this. The wines typically have this essence where it's not that you drink them; it's almost like you chew them towards the back.
Right.
And they're incredibly food friendly, and I like what you've done with this vintage. I think you've captured the freshness of the fruit exactly right where I think it should be. And
I appreciate that. No, like you said,
lift.
You say freshness, and freshness is something I think about like all the time in all the wines that I make. And I hope that making Pinot Noir has informed the way I make other wines, because it takes a light touch.
Yes.
And so I've actually backed way off a lot of things that I used to do in terms of extraction and things like that. Like you don't need it. You don't need extraction with Red Mountain. Like you don't have to worry about it. It's always going to be there.
It's going to give you everything. Yeah.
Yeah. The challenge is like finding that balance and encouraging the freshness, because typically with a hot climate, you lose freshness, right? You get like really darker fruit.
Hedges into the blue fruits rather than
blue fruit, black fruit. You don't get so much like perfumed, aromatic. You don't get spice so much. You don't get as much any of that. I think the whole cluster brings some of that freshness back, and then obviously the Viognier adds like kind of a perfume lift on it as well as a real subtle textural component that I think helps smooth out the tannins.
Yeah.
In the larger format, oak I think is really important as well.
I concur. It's funny. I actually just wrote a paper for the Institute of Masters of Wine program, theory on vessels and how I think it's really important for winemakers to actually find not only the right vessel, the right shape and the right size, because you're talking about when you find the right vessel for your wine, you're talking about surface area, the internal surface area of the wood in conjunction with the volume of wine and how much ratio that will be, but also dialing in which cooper basically helps coax out this beautiful expression from the wine, and how oak and the wine integrate in with one another. And it's almost like Velcro, where they kind of attach, and then over time they start to kind of separate with age.
Right.
And this is what the wine does. What the wine will slowly kind of fall apart, but you want to find that point of where everything is just kicking and firing on all cylinders. It's very easy to over oak wine. You just put your wine in brand new oak barrels, and if you have a generous enough wine, it can absorb it. But to still make a wine that has this much intensity, but is still soft, floral, and has that lift, I find it to be. I think it would be a far more challenging thing to do to get right, and I think you've hit the nail on the head here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I agree with you about everything you're saying about oak, and even with Cabernet, specifically from Red Mountain, the Cabernet we have planted there, and we've planted more of it that's just now coming into production. I'm finding that I like larger barrels than 225s with the Cab as well. I feel like it's a little bit too severe with the 225s with the tannin you get at Red Mountain. So for me, and for like what we're trying to do, the larger formats are better, Yeah. And yeah, I've gone through a lot of different coopers in the few years I've been here. I guess I've been here, this is my 7th vintage here. I've gone through quite a few coopers, and I've kind of thinned the herd out. Like I said earlier, finding what's going to stick is what you have to spend your time doing. And now I've kind of zeroed in on a few coopers that I think really fit well with our wines, and kind of focusing on those. But the thing is, it takes so much time. Everything's just slow. That's just winemaking, Europe's got a lot of a lot of advantage, a lot of years on us. They've been able to figure things out. Been able to figure things out a little bit faster, or they're a little bit further along than we are, just to put it mildly, just because of all the time they've had. But that's one of the exciting things about being here, and goes back to like how I ended up here. I think this region at large, not just Walla Walla, but the whole Pacific Northwest, the Columbia Gorge, people like Nate Reddy at High-U and James Mantone at Syncline, Stephen Thompson and Analemma, doing some really exciting stuff in the Columbia Gorge. And then you have the Willamette Valley has got obviously amazing producers across the board doing really cool stuff. And then the Walla Walla Valley has got amazing people making great wines, but it still feels like a new frontier.
It still very much is in a lot of aspects to the global wine market.
Yeah, we have, having worked in Napa and knowing, what goes on there, kind of the top level, and what we can achieve qualitatively there. I believe that we can achieve the same thing up here, but there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to do exciting stuff up here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just this year alone, Washington welcomed 2 more AVAs, and it's continually growing. People are finding new places to plant, finding new expressions from their grapes in different vineyards and different vineyard sites, and it's the world is still pretty wide open for Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really exciting place to be. It still feels like, I feel like we've accomplished quite a bit since I've been up here, but there's still a long ways to go. And we have force majeure. We bought some property in the area called the North Fork. Yeah, and that's I'm gonna plant that next year. And it's a little further down the canyon. It's kind of, there's an area where the North and South Fork rivers kind of converge, and we're kind of further east down the canyon past that convergence point. And it's a real high elevation, totally different than Red Mountain, totally different than the rocks where the winery is located. So really excited about that. It's a total kind of unknown, other than I'm confident that we will be able to create really high quality stuff. I just think the profile is going to be totally different on what we do there.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, Christophe Brown's or category is not too far from there. So
yeah, it's close.
I could already see. I know what he's doing. I know your skill set and what your motivation is and your style. I've already been thinking about like what you're going to create from that vineyard, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah, and I love Christophe's or category. That's a really amazing wine. I've had it a couple of times. It just shows you what's possible in the area,
From young vines, nonetheless.
Yeah, from young vines.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Any last parting thoughts for the Red Mountain Syrah before we move on to the Walla Walla SJR Vineyard?
I think it's a really, actually, one thing I will say about that vineyard is that it's a pretty unique vineyard for Red Mountain. And Ryan Johnson, who is behind Weather Eye Vineyard, on top of Red Mountain, he planted the Force Majeure Estate Vineyard in 06, 07, and it's really coming into its own, and it's a really well thought out vineyard. It's got 9 different soil types in it, articulated into like micro blocks, so tiny blocks. Some of the blocks are like 0.3 acres. They follow soil contours, they follow soil changes. So it's kind of like a science experiment. It's been fun to get in there and kind of carve things out and make the wines from there.
For sure.
And Ryan's kind of doing even more stuff like that, like up at the top of Red Mountain now, which is really exciting. So,
yeah. Awesome.
But yeah.
So let's go on to the 2018, the SJR Vineyard, Walla Walla Valley, Syrah.
Do it.
It's funny. This is actually the very first time I'm actually opening your wines. I had them kind of resting and tempering for this year. Last year, I remember tasting these wines side by side, and I remember one of the things that struck me is you make both these in pretty much a very similar style.
Right.
You employ the same practices, but looking at the Red Mountain, about how dark and purple it is, as opposed to the Walla Walla, you can actually see through the Walla Walla, and that's one of the things that, to me, it just proves sense of place. Like you get this intensity from Red Mountain, but from Walla Walla, there's this like savory kind of umami character that you get, but it has about the same amount of that mineral tension, but it's a completely different sensation altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing to know about this area at large, I guess, is that volcanic soil is the key, right? So even the cobblestones out here are basalt. And there is a minerality, like a liquid rock that kind of comes through both in Red Mountain and in the wines from the Stones, the Rocks District, the Walla Walla Valley area that has all the cobblestones. Yeah. But when you bring this fruit into the winery, or even go out in the vineyard and you're looking at it, the clusters for the Syrah in the Rocks area, larger berries, more juice, thinner skins. And then Red Mountain, you typically have thick skins, a little smaller berry, a little more concentrated, And so the cluster morphology, the berry morphology is different, and it's evident when you look at the fruit. When you look at juice yields, when you're making the wine, and you get more juice from Syrah that's grown on the rocks, you just have juicier berries. Sure. But then beyond that, it's like a completely different animal.
Yeah, it's like trying both of these. It's like almost you get to see the range of what Syrah does. With Red Mountain, it's like it's intense, it's bold, it's grippy. But then you get the Walla Walla, and it's soft, floral, feminine, and kind of savory. And yet, you're talking basically the same vintage with using the same winemaking techniques, and you get two completely different expressions with different levels of anthocyanins and floral aspects to it.
Yeah, and the tannic structure is so different. I think the Red Mountain is like masculine.
Yeah.
The SJR Vineyard, the Rocks Syrah, is more of a feminine style, for lack of a better word. And both vineyards were planted about the same time. Like you're saying, the winemaking technique on both of them is intentionally very similar because I want to showcase the difference of place. I'm not trying to make the same wines. That'd be boring. So let it be what it is. I remember the first time I worked with SJR Vineyard, when I worked with Rocks Fruit, was 2016. And I talked to Matt Reinvan. I asked him a question about it. I was like, wow, the chemistry is really weird. I've never seen anything like that. And he was like, embrace the pH. So it's like, you have these wines from Red Mountain that have naturally kind of higher acidity, lower pH. And then you have wines from the Rocks District that there's a high potassium content. So you get a pH shift. You get this brininess, this salinity, black olive that comes with the higher pH. We don't know exactly what's happening or why. And that's part of what's exciting about it. Like, I don't know if I want to really know. I just want to I know like what to do with it when I get it in the winery and make it delicious, but I don't want to like manipulate it. I do know people that they don't particularly like the Rocks profile, and they'll try to manipulate the wines, and I'm not a believer in that. I think that if you don't like fruit from somewhere, don't work with it, go source it from somewhere else. Yeah. So I will say, the Rocks wines can be, the Rocks District wines can be like kind of polarizing in a way. I think some people think they're a little bit too wild and weird because they're briny, they're black olive, they're savory, they're not fruity first,
Yeah, exactly. It's the non-fruit that captures you.
But I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
But I think the whole cluster semi-carbonic thing happening with a lot of Walla Walla varietals helps lift those aromatics, and you end up getting a touch of those high toned red fruit and florals kind of initially. But I think that helps to kind of like compound things and lift it up, because you do get those savory kind of umami, briny characteristics. So if you can compound that with the effects of whole cluster or semicarbonic, even concrete vessel, you start to pull out part of the expression and lift it and amplify one part.
Right.
So it puts everything else in focus.
That's right. Yep. And I think, whole cluster, I've played around a little bit of whole cluster in the rocks area, the fruit that I've worked with, and it's, the Reikis have to be ripe, the right ripeness, or you can get some kind of green, a little bit hard green character into the wine. So that's something to keep in mind. But I love the area. I think one of the things that's cool too is there's still a lot of general kind of agriculture. There's a lot of orchards here. There's a lot of wheat. It's not like a monolithic, a monoculture, of just one crop. So
there's a fair amount of wheats in that world.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems that could catch on fire, because that goes up super quick.
Yeah, but at least we don't have for better or worse, there's not like the big timber like California, like Napa has, or like out the gorge or out Willamette Valley, where you have these massive trees and forests burning. The grass fires tend to get put out pretty fast, but yeah, to me, Syrah, I think this is I wish everybody could taste these wines, because this is it's a fun comparison. It shows you how transparent Syrah can be to where it's grown. Yes. And I think that's something that people don't really think about a lot. We talk about Pinot Noir in that way, but we don't talk about
Chardonnay.
Syrah. Yeah, Chardonnay. Syrah is like maybe the most transparent out of everything, at least what I've seen working with it. It's night and day. These wines are totally different. It's nothing more than just the soil type and the general climate.
Yeah, Aaron Brooks and I had a podcast earlier this year about the varietals from our regions that people should be completely aware of. And hers was Chardonnay from Oregon, and mine was Syrah from Washington. Cabernet outplants Syrah 4-1 in Washington. But I think Syrah can be made in such a way where it's really, really good at the big, bold, expressive end, but also really, really good at the, soft, floral, feminine fruity end as well, where it's not like, oh, we just messed up, so we're going to push it one way. It's like both can be made really, really well, and it shows the versatility of Syrah in Washington. And it's a very, very interesting place now, specifically right now, currently, for these Rhone varietals, for Syrah specifically in Washington, because it has such a wide profile with high quality at either end. And I think over the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see Syrah become more of a major player of the red grapes. I don't think we'll ever catch Cabernet in that regards. Cabernet is your moneymaker. You should plant it, you should grow it, you should make it, because it's going to make you money.
Yep.
But Syrah from Washington is absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
And you should go out and try, experiment, try a bunch of different ones and see which ones you like. See why it's such a unique expression for Washington State.
Totally. And even like, California, going back to, Sonoma Coast, some Syrahs coming out of Sonoma Coast, really exciting, really just beautiful, very restrained style, very different. But it's like you say, you can do the whole spectrum from, low alcohol, very lean, more austere style, and still be really beautiful and pretty, up to like, full throttle, and everything can be really good. So Syrah is cool like that.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yep.
Awesome. Any last words about the SJR Vineyard Syrah?
Yeah, so that's a vineyard we started working with in 2016. It's owned by the Robertson family, and it's actually like kind of just behind the winery. It's not far from here. You could almost throw a rock and hit it. And they have their own brand called Delmas, and they farm that site, like I mean, as intensely as I've seen anyone farm anything. They're really passionate about that place, and we just get a couple of small blocks and make the SJR Vineyard designate, and it's all, you know, cobblestones, and Brooke Robertson is she's the viticulturist there. She's retrained the vineyard in these head trained formats that you can still bury the vines in the winter, because it does get very cold here. So rather than just burying canes, they're doing kind of a hybrid training method that's really interesting, and that's the kind of thing I think is going to push things forward here in Walla Walla, is that kind of forward thinking mentality and progressive mindset.
Cool.
Yeah,
I agree. It's interesting times for sure.
yeah.
So do you see force majeure growing in terms of either overall output or bottles in the range?
We're going to always stay relatively small. I mean, our kind of model is that we have the Red Mountain site, which has 18 acres, about 18 acres planted now, and that's as much as we're going to plant there. And then we have an 8-acre site where the winery is located that's mostly Syrah. We haven't released anything from that vineyard yet. And then the North Fork property, which we'll probably have eventually, you know, 25, 30 acres, maybe something like that planted there. Mm-hmm. And that's as big as we're going to be. And we'll do single vineyard wines. And then also the Parabellum bottling that we do, that will become a blend of the 3 sites. Things that are declassified and younger vines will go into the Parabellum bottlings. So we'll have one that's focused on Rhone varietals, and then one that's focused on Bordeaux varietals from the different sites.
Cool, awesome. So working now with Pinot Noir and Willamette with Holocene, are there any other varietals that you'd like to work with in the future?
Well, I got a little bit of Pinot Gris this year. I wasn't able to get as much Pinot Noir as I wanted because of fire, but I did get some Pinot Gris, brought that in, and I did some skin contact with that, and we'll see how that goes. It's really delicious so far, but I kept it on the skins for a long time, and I've got some in amphora and some in, you know, some neutral Burgundy barrels. And I think one varietal I keep thinking about a lot is Menthea.
Yeah.
I love Menthea, and I know that, you know, Stephen Thompson's got some planted in the gorge at Analemma, and I've tasted it. It's pretty delicious, and I feel like that varietal has some potential here, as well as some other Spanish varietals. I know that you know, Jesus from Valdemar Estate is talking about bringing in some Spanish varietals like Macabeo and some other things that are not here yet. Yeah. Going through the WSU to bring those in and certify the material, and I'm pretty interested in some Spanish varietals. I think about things like Godello too. You know, just cool. Some interesting stuff that I think we could do that's a little bit different, you know, than what you typically see.
Yeah, looking at the different terroirs of Washington, I think both Spanish varietals and Italian varietals, the obscure ones, would actually do rather well. But it's just taking the time to get them in here and then plant something that literally has no market.
Yeah, exactly.
And then creating and be like, cool, like my job not only is to grow this and make wine from it, but to create buzz and a market for this.
Right.
But I see the potential for Spanish and Italian varietals.
Definitely.
You know, but this is like 20 to 50 years down the line. But,
right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one thing that's interesting is, so my consulting work with the Walls Vineyards, they have a wine called Stanley Groovy that is all Portuguese varietals, mostly Portuguese varietals. So getting to see the Portuguese stuff and tasting it and working with it's been really interesting. And I think there's a lot of potential for those varietals here. But again, it's like a marketability thing. Like, you know, how recognizable is that? Although Touriga Nacional is now in Bordeaux. So, you know, who knows?
I don't know if anyone actually planted yet, but it's legally allowed.
It's allowed now. Yeah.
That happened was it?
It was last year.
2020's 2020 has been going on so long. It feels like it's a decade. Was it last year? Like, it was last year.
It was last year. I was actually in Bordeaux when they made that announcement, so it was pretty interesting. And
a lot of head scratching. Really, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there were some other.
Even Bordeaux is getting ready for climate change. Like,
Oh yeah. Well, like things like Suzhou and
yeah,
Turia, they hold acidity so well.
yeah,
It can get hot and the acid is still there; it doesn't drop out, and you
yeah.
still have good freshness in the fruit. So those are varietals that I think are really interesting. And we can geek out on that stuff too as wine people. But you talk about general consumer, some things are more recognizable than others, shall we
Sure.
say? And so it becomes a question of like, will people buy it? If you build it, they will come. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's
It's one
interesting.
of those things where if a good wine is a good wine regardless. All you
Right.
do
Yeah.
is make it and then put it in someone's hand and then have them try it. Or
Right.
send it to us and we'll tell the world what yay or nay.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for a lot of different stuff up here. I love Barolo. I'd be terrified to grow Nebbiolo because I feel like I would never be able to make
No.
anything like
You
what I
would
enjoy
always be
drinking.
in the shadow of Barolo.
Yeah, so it's like I don't know. That's probably not the one. There's a lot of other things though that would be really
Maybe like
fun
a
to.
Gamay style or like a Gattinara. But
Yeah,
like if you try and like emulate Barolo, like not only will you probably piss off a lot of people in Barolo, but like what are they doing in Washington?
right.
But it's Nebbiolo. It's hard to get right in other places. There's a reason why very few places have actually made successful Nebbiolos outside of Italy. I mean, there are a few, but it's really, really challenging. It's not like Chardonnay where you can just put it in the ground and like, oh, cool, we got a Chardonnay.
Right.
It's almost like Pinot Noir where it has to have these right conditions for it to like end up being somewhat like the characteristics that you're looking for.
Right. Yeah, so it's a scary one. It's like,
Awesome.
no.
We're getting towards the end here.
Okay.
I know that Instagram tends to kick us off within an hour, so we're at about six minutes till.
Okay.
Do you have any advice to new young winemakers, maybe coming out of Walla Walla college, or any young winemaker who wants to make wine in Washington?
Yeah, I think first thing when you get out of school is like forget everything you just learned. Now come make wine for real. No, seriously. I think you always have to work hard. Hard work is like number one. Be ready to work and be ready to not just have things given to you and have some ideas. Come with ideas, but don't think you know everything because you went to school. Come with ideas, but come ready to listen as well and put your head down, open your ears, open your eyes, and taste a lot of wine. Don't just drink what's in your backyard, but drink wine from everywhere. Talk to a lot of people, do a lot of research, do a lot of reading, have an open mind, be progressive in your thought process, but also ask people that have been doing it for a long time and learn from them. And then if you think, you don't agree with something or you think something can be better, try and make it so. But have a respect for the people who came before and whose shoulders you're standing on. Use common sense and, have good etiquette and think big. I think those are the most important things. And I think focus on the vineyard and learn about the growing side of everything that you're doing, not just the cellar. You need to have a kind of a holistic approach and to really understand. That's my opinion.
Awesome. Yeah, very well said. I'm just reflecting on culinary students who I know went to either STI or CIA. They're like, yeah, I graduated. I'm going to go be a chef now.
Yeah.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah. Bless you.
Go work in a kitchen, go through the meat grinder.
Yeah.
See what it feels like, then work your way up.
I think you got to, you got to pay your dues. You have to learn your craft. Education is important, but it's the first step.
For sure.
And when you get out and you start actually doing things that you thought you knew, you realize that you don't know. So don't be cocky, don't be arrogant, be humble, and seek out good people that, you respect. Don't be afraid of approaching people. And I think just you know, if you're humble and you ask for advice, people will give it to you.
For sure.
You know, and don't be afraid of feedback or criticism either.
For sure. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Todd, thank you so much. I know you're a very busy man right now, and
it was great.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy day for us.
No, thank you.
Before we go, do you have any last thoughts or parting words for us today?
So I guess I'll just say thanks for tuning in. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks for being interested in what we're doing, and I want to thank you, Anthony, for having me and for tasting the wines and for appreciating what we do. I do want to say science is real. Wear a mask, social distance, and vote next week.
Next week, 6 days. 6 days.
Yep.
For sure, man. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
Until next week, keep it locked here. I've got Sebastian Beaumont from Beaumont Family Wines in South Africa. He'll be joining me next week, same time, same channel. Until then, stay safe, drink well.
Cheers.
And others.
Cheers. See ya.
Adios.